Hey guys, welcome into another episode of From the Wing. I'm Christian Clark, the Pelicans beat writer for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune. We've got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about this Cleveland Cavaliers game. Got a bunch of notes on that one. We're going to have a big picture conversation about Willie Green and the job he has done over the past 3 years. And then we're going to talk scoring down, not just with the Pelicans, but the NBA in general since the All-Star break. There's been a lot of interesting reporting about refs basically swallowing their whistles a little bit. And in my opinion, having a little bit more of a common sense approach to officiating games. Really excited to talk about that at the end of the show. Adam, this Cleveland game, the Pelicans were on a four-game winning streak, came to a halt. This kind of sucked. No way around it. They got beat pretty bad. To me, the third quarter of this game was the story of this game. I went back and rewatched it this morning just so I had a really good handle on it. The Pelicans got outshot 20-4 in 3-pointers in this game. I mean, you're just never going to overcome that kind of 3-point deficit. 11-2 threes were in favor of Cleveland in the first half. The Pelicans actually had it at 8 at halftime. And, they're kind of hanging around. And then at the end of the third quarter, the Pelicans were down 19 points. It was really like, okay, there was an opportunity for them to make a run in the third quarter, and they were able to. Darius Garland closed the third quarter really, really well. I've got a lot of, I guess, more specific thoughts on the third quarter in general, but what did you see in that stretch there that really decided that game?
Yeah, so obviously Cleveland comes out flaming hot. Everybody's making their threes. Isaac Okoro's making his threes. And I know he's having a better shooting season, but typically you need to be able to bail on Isaac Okoro to defend the Cleveland Cavaliers well, and you couldn't in this game. So they were in a really tough predicament. We've seen them battle quote unquote the math before and lose. We talk about this all the time. 3-point volume is hard for them to come by because of how they need to get it sometimes. So to get that staunch a deficit is tough right out the gate. I thought it was a lot of things. I thought Jared Allen completely worked us inside right out the gate. We couldn't stop entry passes. We couldn't defend him on the short roll. It was he just outclassed us and made his first 5 shots. I thought this game was one of the best true 2-man tandem guard games that I've seen from Garland and Mitchell in a while. There's been this thing going on with Cleveland for those that aren't following it, but Cleveland is a team I have to mini obsess over because, we have been interested in some of their pieces in the past, and I want to know how this is going to play out for them. They've had this weird thing where essentially Garland, the true point guard, plus Jared Allen equals good, and Donovan Mitchell plus Mobley equals good. And the mixture of all of them, very similarly to us, is messy and problematic. But last night, it all just looked great. Donovan and Garland played so easy off each other. I mean, it helps that Garland made every shot he took. They shot the hell out of the ball. I was proud of us in the first half for even being in the game still with how much of those threes had gone down and how many offensive successes they had, how many ball bounces went their way. But we do have this thing still where we can draw a lot of fouls authentically, and it keeps you in games. And they made their free throws and they stayed in it. And BI and Zion, one thing I can say that characterizes this loss a little bit better than other losses against good teams. None of this was Zion and BI's fault. They did everything they were supposed to do. They looked as solid as they often do. Everyone else was bad. Everyone, if anybody would have contributed a little bit, they'd have had a real shot. CJ had a real stinker. JV could not do anything with Jared Allen. And then you couldn't kind of keep him on the floor because of how they were running. Larry, again, was a struggle. The center position right now is becoming kind of what we predicted late season, a problem.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if I predicted it, but I think you're right. It absolutely was a problem in this game. I mean, not only was it Jared Allen kicking the Pelicans' butts, Damian Jones kicked the Pelicans' butts too. I mean,
yikes.
They the Cavaliers won the frontline matchup, but then they won the bench matchup with the center spot. I mean, Damian Jones, 14 points, 6 rebounds, 7 for 8 from the field, plus 15 in 21 minutes. It looked like that to me. I mean, like he just had the clear advantage on Larry in this game. It was a lot of the Cavs in the pick and roll and hitting that big on the dive. And, like the Pelicans help defenders getting sucked in and the ball getting swung, and then them just hitting these threes. And, I thought the Pelicans actually contested a lot of them. It looked that way
Yep.
to me. And I just think it was a game where it's like, hats off to you guys. Like, you guys just shot the ball really well. I mean, like, Sam Merrill did get a couple open ones right at the end of the third quarter that kind of broke the Pelicans' backs effectively. To your point about the center spot, this was another game where the Pelicans opened the third quarter with Larry Nance Jr. at center, and it didn't really work. I just think that, like, Larry didn't have a great game. And if you look at some of the numbers from the starters plus the Larry lineup, it's actually the Pelicans' second most used lineup this season. And it's been okay. It's close to neutral. I don't think it's been horrible, but it hasn't been great. And you could say the same thing about the Pelicans' regular starting five. So those are just two combos that have been kind of meh for the Pelicans all season. And then when JV got in there in the third quarter, like, one of the defining sequences of this game, 2 minutes left in the third quarter, Jose and JV try to set like this double screen for
Oh
Zion.
no.
JV trips over Jose. When JV is falling to the floor, he accidentally trips Isaac Okoro. The Pelicans get whistled for an offensive foul. It was just like, look, sometimes it's just not your night. And it was not the Pelicans' night on Wednesday.
Yeah, and I don't want to make like the center position the only issue here. Like, I shout out to to quote Willie Green, give the Cavaliers credit. Their defense was great. Their defense was legitimately great all night. It was playoff good all night at every position. They truly did not have a weak spot. And the makes we got were like pretty tough. Like, we were working for everything all night, and they didn't have to work as hard because they just took a million threes and they all went. Like, they're shooting 50+% and they shot like 25, 26 in the first half. Like, that's not normal basketball when you're going to like land on 50+ threes in a game and you're going to make more than 50% of them. Like, that just kind of warps the game to a degree that, like, that's something the Warriors can contend with and not many other people.
They outscored the Pelicans 60-12 from the 3-point arc. I'm not great at math. What's 60 minus 12? Is it 48?
48.
So the
It's
Pelicans
48.
got outscored by 48 points for 3-point. Yeah, it's you're just
Rough.
never, ever, ever gonna win
stuff.
games that way. I can't do like the Basketball Reference game search. Like, I need somebody to do that. But like, I would have to imagine this was up there in terms of just disparity in terms of 3-pointers made in any game this season. That would be my guess.
Yeah. And like, it's not to poo-poo that away and say that that's an outlier, so disregard everything you saw. Like, I generally hate that approach to all games. Like, there's stuff in all of these games. There's bright spots in this game. Like, I was very, very, very happy with Zion. I was also very happy we got a little bit the thing that kind of stemmed the tide at the end of the first half was Zion at the 5 working defensively, like, against that team that was running all over you. And the thing that got them to stop being able to rotate through really easily and get everywhere they wanted, it was a Zion at the 5 lineup. Like, I expect maybe some offensive creativity there, but we limited them moving the ball. We made things difficult for him when he went to the 5, and I have not seen that work yet. Certainly not defensively.
I mean, I thought one of the really interesting things in this game was about 4 minutes left. The Pelicans went to the small ball unit in the second quarter, and it was Brandon Ingram at the 5. It was Brandon Ingram guarding Jared Allen, and the Pelicans switching stuff. And I think they got the lead from like 16-8. And I mean, I looked on Brandon's Basketball Reference page today of just like the, position estimator, and it was like nothing. Like, Brandon almost never plays center. And I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but like, Brandon, you never see Brandon get thrown in there against the 5. And I actually thought he did pretty well. And I know this is obvious. Brandon Ingram is huge. He is like enormous. 6'9", 7'3" wingspan, 9'1" standing reach. That was what he measured, I think, at the draft combine way back when. And he's finally what is he, year 7, year 8, whatever he is. He's finally putting on a little bit of weight too. Like he's a big guy.
I guess I said Zion at the 5 like habitually because it was a small ball lineup and Zion was still out there, but Zion was not actually playing center. Like it's like
Okay,
you
I
said.
didn't know if you were talking about a different point in the game.
No, it was
Sorry.
that portion. They slipped BI onto Jared Allen and he
Okay.
survived. And he didn't even need help. Like that's the thing that was the most astounding. BI got a couple of rotations there where he was left on Jared Allen alone and he was able to deny the ball entry. Like that's not something we've ever seen ever. So but that lineup in general, like just being able to go to it, like we've seen them try like Herb as a center. We've seen him try Trey as a center. We've definitely seen him try Zion as a center. Like you said, we haven't really seen him try BI, and it kind of worked. And it was the first thing that worked against that guy. So intriguing things. And just generally, like, I'm content with the fact that this wasn't a game defined by my 2-star players buckling in the face of adversity. It wasn't them. It was everyone else. And like, I can live with that to a degree when the shooting disparity is this bad.
Yeah. I mean, like, the beginning of the season, I felt like it was such a story of Zion and BI. I don't think we're playing up to their potential early in the season. And I mean, I can tell you definitively that was a topic that was broached in that team meeting that they had earlier in the season. It was like, hey guys, like y'all are the max players. Like we need you to play like it. Like everyone knows they're the 2 most talented players on the team. And I feel like lately they are playing a little bit closer to the potential. Each of those guys. I mean, Zion is in way better shape than he was at the beginning of the season. Some of that defensive playmaking has returned. I mean, he's just moving so much more. Like there was a possession in the first half when I was like, God, you did like 3 dribble handoff dances in one possession. Like you just were not moving like that early in the season. Like if you didn't have the ball trying to attack in a straight line, you just weren't going anywhere. You were loafing earlier in the season. And he's in such better condition now. It's obvious. And I think with Brandon, Zach Lowe did a really good job talking about this in his podcast. The numbers are maybe down for Brandon a little bit. Brandon is playing winning basketball right now. I mean, he's going to lead the Pelicans in assists for a second straight year. We've been on how talented Brandon is as a passer for a long time. I mean, I've written about it like for years. We've talked about it for a long time. Like he has that in his bag. Guy is defending at a really solid level right now. Like I think second best steal and block rates of his career if you look year by year. And I don't know that it's as much the defensive playmaking, but he has had some really nice plays. It's just being in position and using your length and contesting shots. It has just been about being solid on defense within the team context for Brandon to me.
He's been a negative defender in the past, and by every metric, he is either neutral or slightly positive. So, like, while that's, kind of average defender for the league, for him, that's a major change. Somebody asked on Twitter the other day, like, what do we think's happening there? Like somebody that doesn't watch the Pelicans, like, why is the defense good? And it's like, it's kind of everything. Like they don't really blow coverages a lot. They get out and cover every shot that they intend to for the most part. Like they have some mess ups sometimes, but it doesn't happen that often. Like they call a lot of X coverages, and it's not like the guy like misses the backfill when the defender leaves for the first pass. Like they don't make those giant gaffes. And they don't give you a lot easy. They don't foul a lot. And that's just really conducive, plus their size and plus effort. It's really conducive to having good results on a nightly basis. It's just like it's a repeatable thing that works against everybody. Yeah. One quick Zion play that we haven't said, and I just need to say it because it jumped out at me for this season. I think it was the first quarter. I think it was either a live ball turnover or a Cleveland miss. Zion gets the ball at like the free throw line, drives the entire length of the court, passes up his own teammates and three or four defenders in transition, goes straight to the basket. He was running like twice as fast as everyone on my screen. He kicked into a gear that I have not seen and outran the entire defense.
Yeah, it was like seeing someone hit the turbo button in Madden.
It was shocking. It was visibly shocking. And I was just like, oh, okay. All right. Yeah. That. More of that.
Yeah. Look, you're right. And I mean, what Zion and Brandon are doing recently has changed my opinion of this team a little bit. I mean, I think, a while back I was like, okay, the Pelicans are putting together a solid season, but the playoffs just are about top end talent. And I didn't feel like maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, the Pelicans had the top end talent you needed to like win a playoff series. I still don't know if they will, but I do feel better about their chances of like winning a round than I did, like 6 weeks ago for sure. Like it's to the point where I'm like, okay. And Brandon kind of does this too. Like he tends to just start season slowly and pick up steam as the season goes along. And he does have like, a little bit of a history of playing pretty well in like some of the high leverage games. And I'm not saying the Pelicans have been involved in Western Conference finals games or anything, but like, like the games they needed to win at the end of the regular season, the play-in games, that first round series, like he did play really well. I mean, I don't know. It's happened so much where he's just started slowly and I'm worried about him. And then he picks up steam that I'm like, is this just what he does? And also, can he just sustain it a little bit more throughout an 82 game season? Because he's playing really well right now.
Yeah, we've talked about this a bunch. Like we've hit on this so many different episodes, and like why does this happen? I think this year at least there's a little bit of contextual explanation. Like his role has shifted. Like it really took till January for us to be in the format that we're supposed to be in, and everybody in the roles they're supposed to be in, and we're seeing all of that play out and get experimented with now. This is more of like we are chipping away at what are the things that we're going to be able to use in the playoffs. And it's fun to just even be able to get there, even in the criticisms right now, which there are plenty and they are merited. Danny Chow had a great Ringer article about us that kind of laid out the whole thing. And it's accurate. Like all the concerns everybody has about whether we're going to show up against like the real hardcore talents of the playoffs are valid. But I think, for guys that like know us and for fans, I think we know which teams we match up well against. And I think we have some teams that we're like excited to see in a first round. And we're kind of optimistic about the finish of the season, even though we know that like, we're about to go do a 2-game away. We're going to do a 3 games away, Brooklyn, Miami, and Orlando. And that Miami Orlando is going to be a back-to-back, and that's going to be tough. We're playing Boston and the Bucks around that. So it's going to be like a tough little run after this little segment of games coming through the weekend. And, that may turn out that we lose to all the good ones. We might, hopefully we split the back-to-back and beat one of the good teams, but it's okay that this is where we are. And I think there's some stuff that's working. Like we're flashing zone a lot and it's breaking up offenses. Like I don't remember that being a thing that we went to as a trustworthy option in the past. And so like we are flashing some tactical changes. But we'll get into that a little bit more. But I think we're where we're supposed to be. I'm still happy about like the overall arc of the season. It sucks. We all just want the same thing. We all wanted the fifth game of the win streak. We all wanted to beat the cemented playoff team that had their players available and just be able to like shut everybody up after a week of national coverage where they said, hey, we don't think they can beat good teams. And then they lost.
Let's talk a little bit about Willie Green. Every time the Pelicans lose, I feel like my Twitter timeline is just like, he did not make good adjustments. And for whatever reason, like this is every team. It's way more people thinking like, well, the coach should have made these adjustments versus like, actually the players didn't play very well. And like, I don't know, maybe there's stuff you could criticize Willie for last night. Like, maybe they should have ran that small ball lineup with Brandon at the 5 and explored that a little bit more in the second half, which okay. But like when I watched that game, I was like, a lot of players besides Brandon Zion just didn't play very well. That was my takeaway from this game. And I just wanted to like really zoom out and have a big picture conversation about Willie and like the job he's done over these last 3 years and just have a little bit of perspective because I don't think people have perspective with him It's fine if you criticize him because there is stuff you can, but I don't think people like evaluate him with perspective sometimes. If you go back to July 2021 when he took this job, the Pelicans were in the dirt. Alvin Gentry did not work out. Stan Van Gundy did not work out. Zion Williamson gives a semi-alarming press conference at the end of that year that's like, my stepfather says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. When the Pelicans tried to hire a new coach, Zion was MIA. Jacques Vaughn, the Pelicans wanted Jacques Vaughn. Jacques Vaughn said, thanks, but no thanks. I don't know if Jacques Vaughn can coach at all. That was the state of things. I mean, he got let go from the Nets. I don't know if Jacques Vaughn can even coach. And that was the point the Pelicans were at. Jacques Vaughn was saying, thanks, but no thanks. Willie Green's first season, the Zion right foot debacle. Brandon only played 55 games that season, 3-16 start. CJ trade, play-in tournament playoffs. Second season, tied for second in the West on January 1st. Things are going great. We all know what happens next. Zion hamstring. They finish 42-40. Zion and Ingram missed a combined 90 games. The third season, oh yeah, his players actually play. And what happens? Things are going pretty well. They're in 5th place in the Western Conference right now. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. They're going to finish in top 10 in defense in consecutive seasons. I just think when you look at the overall arc, things are fairly positive since Willie Green took over. Like there has been an improvement trend line, I would say, in those 3 years.
I think it would be very, very hard to look at the circumstances in the context of this team, where they were, where they are now, and expect more from anyone. With the array of health outcomes that has happened over the course of the last 3 years, the cultural just crevice between where we were and where we are now, I think there's a lot of credit he deserves. And it really just kind of comes down to the same thing. You mentioned it before. This is not unique to our fan base. Every single fan base hates their coach in a loss. Every single one. When Miami loses, you will see a million tweets that say Spo's an idiot. When Boston loses, you're going to see a million tweets that say Mazzulla's an idiot and he just tells them to take threes and it's not actually an offense and they suck. People are crazy. Like, generally, we get really heated. We get emotional. We're fans. It's what we do. The wild part, though, is like you just lose perspective all the time. And like that's the thing we're trying to capture. On the whole, Willie has done a phenomenal job over the course of the last 3 years, given absolutely obnoxious undue pressure. He walked into hardcore expectations of a disgruntled phenom, and that light is on him from day one. The dude's not talking to him. The dude is like hypothetically going to demand a trade or whatever. Like that kind of talk is happening when he gets here. Without him, we get a cultural revolution on the team. All of a sudden, we see these guys glued to BI. You see the like cultural backbone coming from Herb and Jose and Najee. You see this level of toughness. We experience this thing where we go from like this long era of third quarters being these awful quarters to a year of us coming back in every single third quarter, no matter what deficit, and being in every single game down the stretch. And then you get a Phoenix series from him after, obviously we have no Zion. He's not going to come back. You add CJ to the mix. You get like the one big intense series we get is Phoenix, and Phoenix is the best team in the league. And we beat him twice. We gave him a rough time. We gave Chris Paul a rough time, and Chris Paul and Ayton had to shoot like 24 of 28 to beat us. So I just don't think there's a lot negative to say unless you want to do right now in year 3 with the first season of reasonable health. If you want to do the game by game strategery conversation and say, he doesn't X and O adjust faster than the other guy. He gets coached in circles in a given night. And that's really the only way you can bash him.
I think that I've got 2 theories on why people get down on Willie Green some of the time. I think he's a very even-keeled guy. And when things are not going well, it looked at as not being reactive enough. And then when things are going well, that quality is like, oh, this guy had the ability to remain calm in the eye of the storm. Like I remember Devontae Graham saying that in that first year when they weathered 3-16 and they made it to the play-in tournament. He's like, yeah, Willie Green like remained calm the whole time. Like I just think it would have been a much different thing with Stan. And I think the other thing is Willie Green is going to choose defense over offense a lot of the time. And I think it's just more fun as a fan to root for an offensive first team than a defensive first team. And look, like Willie Green being reactive enough in a playoff series is something I am going to be watching for when assuming the Pelicans make the first round of the playoffs this year. Like I think that's something he's got to prove that he can do is make quick adjustments and make the right adjustments. But it's just hard for me to like wring my hands at the overall job he's done. I think he's good at a lot of the big stuff. I mean, I think there are like small stuff you can quibble with. And I think like last year, for example, after Zion went down, like the offense they were running, I do think it was fair to criticize them for that. I was like, they could be getting the ball to JV more. They've just got to switch it up. Like the bottom really fell out of the offense after Zion went down in a way that it felt like it shouldn't have. And then in the offseason, Willie Green goes and gets James Borrego. Like he's assembled a pretty good staff here. He's got Jaren Collins running the defense, and that's going well. Then he's got James Borrego helping with the offense, and James Borrego is a guy who's going to get a look at head coaching jobs. I don't know, man. I mean, it's like I think he's doing a fine job.
Yeah, I think it's kind of inarguable that he's reached everyone, that the players play for him. I think the remains to be seen. He's a young coach, and he's learned a certain way, and he does skew defensive. And I think he's a player's coach, as is natural for somebody that is a former player that's been in all these roles. Like I think he cares about the guys sometimes to a fault, and may not want to disappoint guys that he has like a lot of personal respect for, and wants to like let them live in their role even when they're playing toxically bad. And I think that's kind of the next question for him. And it's in a lot of ways, like the team and Willie mirror each other. We are currently on track to be consistent. Our record's going to reflect us being consistently good to a point and beating up on bad teams and also occasionally beating good ones and doing pretty well generally. And we don't make a lot of gigantic boneheaded mistakes. We're pretty consistent. That defensive floor really carries them a lot of the way. They've had a lot of different types of offensive output from different guys win them games. The question will be like, what happens tactically? Does the playoffs play in their favor? The shortening of rotations. I think this is one of the things where I think you're going to find benefit with Willie that you don't care about in the regular season, but is going to matter in the postseason. His consistency with lineups and rotations means that guys know what their roles and assignments are. And when this stuff gets trimmed down, when other guys, like he has not thrown dudes in and experimented. When this thing is 9 dudes in the playoffs, everybody knows what they're supposed to do. Whether they execute is going to be on them, but it's clear what their expectations are going to be. And I think that is something that you need to have when you get to the playoffs. You can't have guys guessing about where they're supposed to be defensively, offensively. And I don't think that stuff's a mystery anymore. But I think it's going to be interesting because the team has a bar to get over. They have to show you, can we be better than this? Can we execute against a good team? Can we handle a hostile environment? And Willie's got one too. Can I coach you through that? Can I make adjustments? Can I be looked at tactically as a winner in a series?
The one thing I will say too is I think the starting lineup thing is like a thorny problem. It really is. I mean, is the one they've been trotting out for these 60 games or whatever, is that the best solution? And, the best solution is minus 8 points per 100 possessions. I mean, I really don't know. And like, that's something that does like make me a little bit nervous for the playoffs. It's like, what is the right 5-man combination to start games with? I mean, we've seen them, sub Larry for JV to start at third quarters, and that hasn't really worked either. So that's something I'm really curious about, and I don't know if I know, like, if I have a good feeling about, like, what is the right solution there.
Hot take. I think I think for a while the answer is that there isn't one. I don't think realistically, I think the thing that you know that you would want to change, but do not have the ability to change is the five. And that, like, practically speaking, with who's on this team and what they do, that is the one that you would want to change. And there is not somebody on the roster that can take that spot and improve it. So this is what it is, and you're trying to make up ground in the middle. I think that is what it is this year, and we're going to see that's what the top end of that is. I just really hope that the bigs are healthy when we get there. That's my biggest fear. It was my biggest fear when we started. We talked about, like, I did a whole like month where I was like, oh god, we're going to lean on Larry again because I'm worried about his legs and I'm worried about JV's legs and what I've seen in the past. I think we're going to ride this out and see not a great solution. I think we need a positive matchup in the first round if we want to win. And after that, I don't think there's a lot more meat on the bone than that, because I do think great teams will expose that center position no matter what you bring scheme wise. Like, Jokic is going to eat their lunch if they run into him. I think the Clippers would put in a playoff series would be scary. Like, there's just a lot people can do, except maybe the Thunder because they're small.
Have you downgraded the Clippers at all? I mean, they got so hot and they haven't looked great lately. And Kawhi is back, hurt him to the point where he had to like leave the arena. Basically, we'll see
And
if
he's
he's going to
playing
play.
tonight. He's
Oh,
playing
did they
tonight.
roll him in? Okay.
Yeah, so they ruled him in. He looked good at shoot around, and they actually rested Harden.
Okay.
So yeah, but does that mean he's gonna sit out the back to back? I don't know.
But has the Clippers looking a little bit wobbly downgraded them at all in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, when we last talked about him and talked about like our fear index, we saw like there was a 20 game stretch where they just like didn't lose, and the offense looked incredible. Then Paul George hurts his knee. He's been like, he missed like 3 out of 7 games. Harden has been just kind of okay. They haven't gotten the wild scoring pop from my guy Norm Powell. And yeah, and now Kawhi with back spasms, that could very easily become a thing that lingers or continues. The question with them is always going to be health. I'm still pretty much the same fear of them. It's just, are they healthy when they get to their playoff series? I don't really care what they play like right now. If they're healthy, if those three are healthy in a playoff series, I'm pretty terrified, because if Kawhi's healthy, I'm terrified of Kawhi.
Yeah. Look, I think that's
small downgrade.
Look, I think that's totally understandable. I think you just have to be rooting for Minnesota in the first round if you're a Pelicans fan.
I want it. But you heard me. I want OKC too. I'm cool with either one of them. I do not have this big fear, because as much as you can tell me how great OKC is and how consistent they've been and all this stuff, I have seen us give Shai Gilgeous-Alexander problems. He is their ceiling and their floor, and the floor has been incredibly high. It really, truly has. And Jalen, we've talked about him. He's great. Chet is great. They have a schematic problem with us in the paint and with rebounding. We should be able to exploit that. We should. And I would like to see that in the 7-game series. Look, do I think it's going to be like a walkover or anything like that? No. Do I think we can beat him? Yes.
Let's talk about the shift we've seen with the officiating over the past few weeks. There's been some really good reporting around this topic. Tom Haberstroh and The Finder was one of the first people to point this out. I think Ethan Strauss did as well in his Substack. I mean, if you just look at overall scoring since the All-Star break, it's down about 4 points, about a 12% reduction in free throw attempts over that span as well. As soon as I read about this stuff, like, I really started noticing it. And I think that game against the Cavs on Wednesday was like a glaring example of how things are different. Like, you love to complain about the bad whistle the Pelicans get. And like, I was watching that game and I was like, wow, the Pelicans got away with like six 6 sequences here that would have been called fouls in the old days that are not called fouls post All-Star break. It just does feel different out there. They're letting people play a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's not just been the Cavs game, it has been like this last run of games, and it really does feel like it feels like because these records are really tight and these games really matter, it kind of feels like the playoffs are starting already. Like it feels
Yep.
like we're right there, and we're still pretty far away. Like we still have some games to go. We're a little bit less than a quarter of a season left to go, but April, while it's around the corner, isn't here yet, and this feels like the last 2 weeks of the season, and it's felt like it for the last 2 weeks, which is wild, but it's also reflective of like the current records in the East and the West and just what's at stake for these games, where these teams are. The fact that there is no, like, I guess we can say the Celtics are like the favorite of the entire league because of like just how eye-popping the two-way numbers are and everything like that. But we've also seen them lose to some teams, and we've also seen them in the past get a bad matchup and like kind of choke a little bit. Denver's just lurking always and really starting to put on like Denver's been like in third or fourth like all season, and everybody foregone conclusions be like, yeah, they're going to finish top 2.
I think they're 10
Like,
and
we all
1 in
just
their last
know.
11. Yeah.
Yeah, we all just knew. Like, Jokic is just going to take over, and they're going to end up top 2. So yeah, I think it's just kind of reflective of that. I like this. This is
too.
fun. Defense is really, really good when you let them play it. And it just feels intense.
It has just gotten tilted too far in the offensive players' direction. I like that there was a change. I mean, the NBA is denying that they, instructed officials to do anything. I think, like the league gave a statement to Mark Stein, who inquired about it. I don't buy that at all. I think that's BS. To me, like, there was a stat out there that like the free throw rate was like the third lowest on record last month of, just something ridiculous. Like these data points that are like, okay, there's been this huge reduction, like to the point where it's just like, this is absolutely being called differently. Like it's just obvious to me that there was a directive. I don't care what the NBA says. And I think it's like on one hand, a little bit alarming that the NBA is just not being transparent about it. Like I almost feel like in the David Stern days, he'd be like, yeah, I did. Like I didn't like the way it was going. Like we did this,
Double
deal with
birds.
it, guys. And Adam Silver is just like, he's afraid to admit it. It kind of seems like that way to me. But I think this is overall a good thing. Let me ask you this. Do you think this helps or hurts the Pelicans?
So it's interesting because it depends on the type of foul. So scoring off of free throws is down, but the Pelicans don't foul a ton to begin with. Like we're not one of the terrible fouling teams. We're a turnover team, but we're not a terrible fouling team. And actually, like part of what keeps us in the game a lot is that we can draw fouls. So I think like full like net impact, I think it probably hurts us a little bit.
Really? Well, I was going to go the other way on that.
I think it helps us play like more intense defense, but we were already a top defense. If we're talking about like how does it change us on both sides of the floor as a full net impact, I think it's actually going to hurt us because I don't think our offense is ever smooth. I think we're a middling offense, just like Minnesota is, and sometimes missing the shot and getting to the line is the offense. And if we're not going to get that call and we're going to have more guys staring at the ref like, what the hell? That's gonna hurt. And I don't think there's as much top end to be gained defensively compared to how much it would hurt us offensively, especially recently when we finally started making our goddamn free throws.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could come at it in the way that's like, oh, I feel like Zion wasn't getting those calls anyway. Like he just wasn't one of those players who was getting the foul grifter calls. So like, will it really be that much different? Because he was already playing through a lot of this stuff. But I see your point too, where it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess I could see it going either way. I mean, I know this. Willie Green likes this change. I mean, he gave like a pretty neutral answer when he was asked about it before the game. And he was like, look, we can't have games be 82-79, but I can just tell, like, you can just tell the reporter partner, Brady, he he hated how far in favor of the offensive player the game had become. Like, he did not like that at all. I mean, look, we know he's a guy who really values defense. Like, you just see it with his rotations. I think he's a guy who's like probably pretty happy about this.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, and maybe, maybe I have this wrong, in terms of my interpretation of it, because at the end of the day, like, what this is the playoff whistle came a month and a half early. We talk about playoff whistle year in, year out, multiple decades, and we just happened to get the playoff whistle in February. So, I'm not mad about it, because like we've already been talking about like a playoff cut down of rotations and a playoff atmosphere and matchups and a half court defensively, the type of solutions that the Pelicans have. If we're not getting chippy foul calls on guys like Dyson and Herb, Dyson, who's dunking at practice and almost back, that should bode well for us. That should let us do some things and hurt you defensively and create easy offense out of defense. So maybe the net is actually that we get away with more on defense and we get some fast break stuff that we weren't getting. So I guess it kind of comes down to that. Like, are we able to get fast break opportunities out of it? We're seeming to jump on that a whole hell of a lot more at every position. Like, Brandon's been better about that. Zion just outran an entire floor last night. Herb has been incredible. Herb has been one of the best transition players all year, which is just still so crazy.
Beast.
He's a top 5 transition player, and he's a top 5 3-point shooter. Get out of here.
Quickly on Dyson, it's been about 4 weeks since that surgery to repair the torn meniscus. You're one of the world's foremost experts on meniscus. Why is it that Dyson can be close after 4 weeks, but sometimes you see guys take 3 months to get back? Why is that meniscus recovery timeline so all over the map? Explain that to me, doctor.
Pain tolerance. I'm not a doctor. Pain tolerance. Structurally, there is normally nothing wrong. Like with meniscus injuries, we talked about this via text about Cat when they were like hypothesizing that he wasn't going to get a procedure. There is a ton of outcomes that can happen depending on what type of meniscus injury you can have. Like, if my screen doesn't go blurry, the meniscus is a disc. It can be cut on top. It can be cut vertically. It can be cut on the outside, on the inside. It really depends how large of a tear you have. And is it just like fraying or a sliver that's off? Is it some wear? Normally, these guys have a lateral or medial tear, so on the outside, and it's usually relatively vertical. And what they're doing is going in and they're going to shave off. When you hear meniscectomy, I don't know why we used to get like really afraid that like they're going in and they're cutting half the disc out. No, they're usually shaving off like a very, very small portion. Structurally, your meniscus doesn't do much. It's a cushion. It's a little pillow, and it just absorbs some pressure. But it has no blood flow, so it doesn't repair very well. So guys that tend to, like, you see these big elongated timelines, it's usually because a guy didn't get a surgery right off the bat. And there's typically just not a lot of benefit to trying to rehab this thing. You can try and get like a PRP injection or something to stimulate rehabilitation, but generally there's no blood going in there. It does not heal on its own. And then you end up getting surgery anyway. And then the 6-week timeline starts. Generally speaking, you have to wait a little bit for healing. It's pretty impossible to come back faster than 4 weeks. Once you get into the 4 to 6 week time frame and you don't have like a multitude of injuries, if it's just the one slice or the one tear, you're really dealing with pain tolerance. It can linger for some guys, but for others, like if you have a strong muscle tissue and strong tendons around it, and you have a lot of support function in that knee, you may feel less pain than others. So once you're really past the 4-week part, you're not really talking about healing at that part. You're talking about pain tolerance. Guys are different. Some dudes don't feel pain and some dudes feel everything. So yeah, it's just after 4 weeks, you are in the window of possibility. Some dudes need like another procedure. Like in Trey's instance, Trey was not 6 weeks. Trey also needed another injection in his knee. It was a little more complicated, but your average meniscus, structurally, you're all right in 4 to 5 weeks. And after that, it's just pain.
Okay. 2 really important games for the Pelicans coming up this weekend. Friday against the Clippers, Saturday against Portland Trailblazers. 2 games you'd really like to win. I mean, you'd really like to go 2-1 in this homestand. I will be in the blender. I'm looking forward to these, man. Friday, I think, is going to be pretty live in there.
Yeah, dude, we got to get these. We got to get these because the next little run up is that Eastern slate that I was talking about with that Florida back-to-back, and that's going to be pretty gnarly. So, the Bucks have done us no favors against all of our common opponents, and I'm sure that means they'll show up and score 130 against us. So we need to get these so that there's some alleviated pressure, because people aren't focusing on this now, but there are 2 things that can happen at the end of the season. We can either do good in this stretch and alleviate some of the back end pressure on this season, or the last 3 games of your season are going to come down to Sacramento, Golden State, Lakers to decide everything, like all of the seeding. So you kind of want to get ahead of the game right now. You kind of want to stress that lead out a little bit.
Game 82 against the Lakers, baby. What could go wrong?
Absolutely nothing. Clearly, I do feel good clearly about beating the Kings, but I just don't let that be 51 or 52, get to 50 before you get there. And then let the full sweep of Sacramento be the crown jewel. And then Golden State and the Lakers don't even matter. You're just playing misery games against them.
I want the Pelicans to beat the Kings. I mean, because I want the Pelicans to improve their seeding, but I want them to complete the 5-0 series sweep. Yeah. I don't know how many of those there have been in recent NBA history, but the Pelicans will play the Kings 5 times. That is a product of the in-season tournament. They have a chance to go 5-0. That'd be pretty cool. That'd be hilarious. Be the Kings' daddies.
Especially when they're also doing the same thing to the Lakers, and we can't consistently beat the Lakers. We're still doing the thing where we beat the Kings and the Kings beat the Lakers. And yeah, it's a fun little like basketball understory.
All right, Adam. Well, thank you for weighing in with your medical opinions on this episode. I took all that stuff very seriously. Appreciate you guys listening.
He was typing away.
And we'll talk to you again soon.